What if I told you that in just one race Ferrari has gone from doubting Lewis Hamilton to making him the absolute center of its entire technical project? Because what happened in China is not simply a podium or a specific improvement, it is something much deeper. It is the exact moment in which within Maranello they stop seeing Hamilton as a driver in adaptation and begin to build the car around him. But here comes the big question that changes everything. What has Ferrari seen in the data from the Chinese GP to make such a radical decision in such a short time? The answer not only redefines Hamilton's future in red, it can also completely change the fight for the championship. Ferrari did not need many races to understand that the problem was not just the car, but the complexity of making it work, because from the beginning of the season the SF26 was presented as an extremely difficult car to decipher, with a very narrow performance window, changes in behavior between stints and a critical sensitivity to the tires that forced the drivers to drive cautiously instead of attacking. And in that context Hamilton was not competing at the limit, he was surviving a car that did not allow him to exploit his natural style. This became evident from the first races, where internally in Maranello the narrative was clear. Lewis was still in a deep adaptation phase, facing a completely different concept than the one he had been working on for years, having to relearn basic references such as the braking point, the way to load the front axle, and, above all, how to manage degradation in a car that punished any excess, something that was even reflected in his radio communication with constant comments about the balance and lack of confidence at key moments. The problem was not minor because this Ferrari did not forgive mistakes, and when the tires began to overheat, the performance dropped abruptly, complicating overtaking, race pace and consistency in long runs, which generated a feeling shared by both Hamilton and Leclerc. The car had potential, but it was extremely difficult to squeeze out during an entire race without ups and downs appearing, something that had already been creeping in even from the previous season. And this is where the key point of all this change begins to be built, because while from the outside there was talk of a lack of adaptation or even doubts about Hamilton's performance, within Ferrari the approach was completely different. They understood that the process was not immediate, that the Briton needed time to understand the real limitations of the car, and that only from there could he begin to exploit his strengths, something that in Australia had already left small signs when trying to adjust his style towards one more similar to that of Leclerc, prioritizing cornering speed over aggressiveness. An entry. But that attempt was still incomplete, because Hamilton was still in an intermediate phase, without being able to fully apply his experience nor adapt 100% to the behavior of the SF26, which generated an irregular performance that did not reflect his true level. And it is precisely that tension between adaptation and limitation that makes China a turning point, because everything that Ferrari had been observing as potential finally begins to materialize. The real turning point does not occur on the track. It occurs in the data, because that is where Ferrari discovers something that completely changes its interpretation of Hamilton, since by analyzing in detail what happened in China, the engineers detect a pattern that they had not seen in the first races. Lewis is no longer fighting the car, he is beginning to understand it and, more importantly, exploit it in the areas where it really makes a difference. The first thing that draws attention within the team is the management of degradation, because Hamilton not only equals the internal references, in some moments he surpasses them, something that is no coincidence, since he begins to adapt his style towards a much more efficient approach, leaving behind that initial aggressiveness that penalized him and building his laps from the corner exit, maximizing traction and taking care of the tires in critical phases of the stint, which allows him to maintain a constant pace when others begin to fall. But the most important thing is not only the consistency but how it is achieved, because this is where Ferrari understands that Hamilton has made a key adjustment. He has modified his way of attacking the corners, going from looking for the limit at the entrance to prioritizing the preparation of the exit, something that fits perfectly with the behavior of the SF26 after the updates introduced in China, a car that gains performance precisely when stability in medium support and efficiency in traction is required, and not when it is forced in aggressive entry phases. This detail changes absolutely everything within the team, because it is no longer a case of a driver trying to adapt to a complicated car, but rather a driver who has found a way to align himself with his technical DNA, and when that happens, the next step is inevitable. Start building the development of the car around that style, since that is where the hidden performance of the car is truly unlocked. Ferrari then interprets that what was seen in China is not a specific peak, but the validation of a path, because Hamilton has not only been fast, he has been efficient, consistent, and, above all, capable of maximizing a new package from the first moment, something that does not go unnoticed within the paddock and that begins to change the external perception of the team. especially when seeing how a Ferrari manages to compete in real conditions against direct rivals on a weekend where every detail counted. The next step in this story is no longer just about what Hamilton has achieved, but about what this causes within Ferrari for the immediate future. Because when a team so clearly identifies the path it must follow, the entire focus changes, and that is exactly what begins to happen after China. The SF26 stops being an unpredictable car that must be tamed every weekend and begins to become a base on which to build performance in a progressive and directed way. Ferrari understands that the updates introduced have not only improved the car, but have revealed something more important. What kind of behavior the car needs to be consistently competitive, and that behavior is directly aligned with the way Hamilton is driving now, meaning that the room for improvement no longer depends solely on adding downforce or efficiency, but on continuing to deepen that philosophy that has been proven to work in real racing conditions. This has a key consequence in development because from this point Ferrari is no longer evolving blindly, it is no longer testing solutions without a clear reference, it now has concrete data, real comparisons and, above all, a performance pattern that they know works when everything aligns, which reduces uncertainty and accelerates the car's evolution process in the following races. And this is where Hamilton's figure becomes even more decisive, because he has not only shown that he can adapt, but that he can also interpret the car and translate his sensations into useful technical direction, something that in Formula One is pure gold, since it allows engineers to make more precise decisions and avoid wrong paths in development, optimizing each update that comes to the car. Furthermore, within the team an idea is beginning to consolidate that could mark the season. If this level of understanding between driver and car is maintained, Ferrari can not only improve, it can do so faster than its rivals, because while other teams continue looking for answers, they have already identified the right questions, and that in such a close championship can be the difference between fighting for podiums or getting fully into the fight for the title. Therefore, what China leaves behind is not only an improvement in performance, it is a strategic advantage in development because Ferrari is no longer reacting to problems, it is building on certainties, and those certainties are based on the complete adaptation of Hamilton, which has gone from being a phase of the project to becoming the tool that can accelerate the entire project. And this is where the most important decision of all is born, because Ferrari stops wondering how long it will take Hamilton to adapt, and begins to wonder how far they can go if they develop the car in the direction that he is setting, a change of mentality that not only redefines the team's present, but also opens a new phase in the project where Lewis stops being an unknown and becomes the reference. And this is where everything fits, because what Ferrari sees after China is not just performance, it is direction, it is clarity, it is the confirmation that for the first time in this project they have a real base on which to build, and that base has a name and surname. Lewis Hamilton, since his adaptation has not only arrived, but has completely redefined how the SF26 should evolve from now on. Within the team, the conclusion is forceful because they understand that when a driver not only adapts, but is able to maximize a new package from the first moment, maintain consistency in variable conditions and also align his style with the strengths of the car, he stops being just another element, and becomes the axis on which all development revolves, something that in Formula One makes the difference between competing and truly aspiring to dominate. This changes the weight of internal decisions because now the setup, the evolutions and the technical direction begin to filter through what Hamilton needs to extract that performance that he has already shown exists, which implies that Ferrari has not only found speed, it has found a clear path, something that does not always happen even in leading teams. And if we add to this the context of the beginning of the season, where Ferrari came from doubts, a difficult car and an adaptation process that seemed long, what happens in China becomes even more relevant, because it completely breaks that narrative and replaces it with another one that is much more dangerous for its rivals. That of a team that begins to understand its own car just at the moment when its star driver begins to squeeze it. The great consequence of all this is that Ferrari is no longer reacting, it is building, and it is doing so around a driver who not only has the experience to lead that process, but who has already shown on the track that he can transform that technical direction into real results, which makes China much more than a race. It is the beginning of a new stage where Hamilton is not a bet, he is the centerpiece of the project. What Ferrari has revealed after the Chinese Grand Prix is not simply a one-off improvement or a solid weekend. It is confirmation that they have crossed a line that completely changes their season, because they have gone from having a car that is difficult to understand and a driver in the process of adapting, to having clear technical direction based on someone capable of extracting maximum performance when it matters most. Hamilton is no longer a mystery within the team, he is no longer that driver who was trying to decipher a complex car. He is now the reference that is leading the way, the point on which Ferrari begins to build its immediate future, and that in modern Formula One is the closest thing that exists to finding a real competitive advantage. Because when a team finds that connection between car and driver, when it manages to align technical development with the driving style that really unlocks performance, everything changes. Decisions are more precise, evolutions have a clear objective, and the margin for growth is multiplied, and exactly that is what Ferrari believes it has found in China. From now on, every update, every adjustment, and every step in the development of the SF26 will have a very clear reference, and that makes Hamilton not only the leader on the track, but also the technical driving force of the project, something that can completely redefine the balance of forces on the grid if this path is maintained. So the story is no longer about adaptation. It is about evolution, and Ferrari is clear. If what we saw in China is just the beginning, then we are not seeing Hamilton's growth within the team, we are seeing the birth of a Ferrari built to win with him. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.